Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Hello, and welcome to Backstage Pass. My name is Gail Davis, and I am your host. I am so excited to have Shawn Achor join us today. Shawn is a positive psychology expert and one of the world's leading experts on the connection between happiness and success. He is also one of GDA Speakers' Gold Star speakers with over 45 bookings. His TED Talk on happiness and success has reached over 25 million viewers and remains one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. The timing of our conversation today is ideal. Shawn's latest book, The Power of Beliefs, just debuted on the New York Times bestseller list, and it really expands on the research that made the happiness advantage a global phenomenon. And we're going to dive into all that today. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you so much for having me, Gail. I was looking forward to this.
You know, I was looking back this morning on those 45 bookings, and most of our work was pre-pandemic. I mean, you've done some things since 2020, but most of it was pre-pandemic. And that tracks with a LinkedIn post you made last week. You were referencing that your new book hit the New York Times list, and you mentioned that your daughter Zoe, who was born 3 months early in 2018, I believe,
yes,
that you made a decision to stay home with her. And you thought at that time, there probably wasn't another book on the horizon.
That's right.
I want to start there. What's been going on with Shawn Achor over the last 8 years? And what made you want to write this new book? And how's Zoe doing? Let's also cover that.
First of all, we'll start there. Zoe's doing great. She just turned 8. I'm taking her actually on a talk this week, taking her out of school for the last day, and she's going to sit in the back of the room and take notes. And so she normally counts how many times people laugh in the audience, and then she reports it back to me. So she's doing wonderfully. But yes, it's I took a big step back away from work, and you're not the only person that's asking this. I feel like every time I'm getting on these podcasts are like, where did you go for like 8 years? Because you went quiet. I just did an interview actually, which is exciting as well. A month ago with Oprah's team, and they were like, we were doing stuff with you. We had the Super Soul session, and then suddenly you were silent. And the reason I was silent is my last book launch was 8 years ago. And when that book came out, the day before the book came out, and I was about to go on this big book tour and all this speaking engagements, my wife's water broke 3 months early. And our daughter was born 3 months. We almost lost her 3 times in a 2-day period of time. And she kept sparking back to life. We found her name. It's Zoe Sparks Achor. And as I mentioned, she's doing great. But what it allowed me to do is to take this research that I was going to go speak about and bring it to life. But also at the same time, I made a decision holding her little hand in the NICU while she was there for 50 days while they tried to keep her alive. I decided I was going to take a step back. And it was one of the greatest things that I've done. It gave space, it gave me time with our family and bonded. But it was hard too, because you watch all these opportunities pass by and it feels like the world's passing by. So I was like, well, I'll never see Oprah again, and we won't have all these bookings again. And all of that started to change over the past year. And especially with this book, because not only did staying home with her yield all this information that I was learning as a parent about the power of beliefs and how they shape not only our experience of the present, but how they predict what happens next. But then we were seeing it because I took a step back. I had time to work with all these schools and hospitals that were dealing with burnout and loneliness and disconnection and AI coming in. And how do we, in the midst of all of this, how do we find a way of being able to pursue a better life? How do we raise our success and happiness at the same time? And so I wrote this book not knowing what was going to happen. And then it made the New York Times bestseller list, and Oprah called and Gail called. So things are going great.
I love that. Oprah and Gail. That is fantastic.
That's right. Yes.
I love that. And one of the questions I asked you before we started recording is, Does this mean that you're back on the speaking circuit? And the answer is
I'm back and
yes.
I'm loving it. Yes. And this research is resonating in a way that didn't even resonate before. Before, I would occasionally get a standing ovation and people would laugh and people are constantly, they're still sending emails from 10 years ago of things that they were doing at their companies. But I just got off of a speaking tour with the book launch. I had 7 talks in 9 days and I got 6 standing ovations during that time. And I say I got them, but honestly, it's you could tell that the research was hitting people in a way that they were starving for this, that we're hungry for meaning, especially in a world where there is so much disconnection or uncertainty around AI or uncertainty about geopolitics and the economy. And suddenly, when you could see a pathway forward that not only could improve your life, but you could see how it could improve the success rate of a team or their well being, um, it was hitting people at multiple levels, not just the business outcomes, but in their life as well.
That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is how have you seen the power of belief show up inside companies and also teams that you've worked with?
Well, my previous work, as you know, Gail, was the happiness advantage, which we found when the brain becomes more positive than just our genes and environment. Every single business and educational outcome we know how to test for through Harvard Medical School, Harvard Business School, and Harvard School of Education, all of them improve dramatically. That a positive brain is a competitive advantage in the modern economy. So we got a lot of work with businesses with that. But what I started realizing over the past 8 years is that it's bigger than happiness. That there are these beliefs that drive and predict what happens next within our life. So, for example, we know that having a positive brain is helpful, but I started looking to see we have beliefs about everything. We have beliefs about whether or not it's safe to be in a Waymo or whether crypto has value, or we have belief about flare pants and what's going to happen in the economy and whether or not our benefits are good, right? We have beliefs about everything, but very few of those are very predictive of our future. But there are some core beliefs that are highly predictive of pretty much everything: longevity, sales, productivity, energy levels, burnout. And what we're experiencing in the midst of this world is we're experiencing these 4 horsemen of the modern world: the burnout, the anxiety, the loneliness, and depression. And the pathway forward, people know that. I think people have been talking about that. Depression rates have doubled for every age group, including 8-year-olds. But the worst part of it is that people have given up hope. They're like, this is the new norm, that those numbers are going to stay high and they're going to keep going higher. We thought after the pandemic, things would get better and things got worse. So there's a challenge that we're experiencing. This is why only 16% of people, according to Gallup, want to stay in the same job that they have this year, next year, which is the lowest in history of testing this. We're seeing consumer sentiment at the lowest in recorded history, lower than during the pandemic when the economy collapsed. So those are driven by our beliefs, and they're actually driven by these 7 core beliefs. And what we're finding is these beliefs predict not only our experience of what's happening right now, but they predict what happens next. So, for example, in terms of sales, we've been finding that if we can get someone to believe that their behavior matters versus my behavior doesn't matter, when people believe that their behavior matters, they make that next phone call. And what we find is their sales cross industry 2 years later rise by 37% if we can get you in the top quartile of those beliefs, which is
I
incredible.
made a note of that this morning. I thought, well, there's one opportunity for Shawn. Every company has a global sales kickoff meeting. I think this is a really critical message, that power of belief. And you can increase your sales by 37%. That's impressive.
The sales is the easiest thing for us to track because we can so easily quantify it. So we've done so much work. We've been working with Nationwide Insurance and with USAA. And with both of those groups, we were working with their teams, with some of their leaders, and we were highlighting these core beliefs. My behavior matters. I'm not alone. This work is meaningful. And we were able to raise the revenues by 50% in an 18-month period of time with those teams. And they have the highest engagement score change on those teams. So we're actually doing a ton of work in the sales area where people are not only onboarding their sales leader, but they're trying to keep them in the midst of all the disruption in terms of technology.
Another statistic that I loved in the first part of your book that really exemplifies the importance of beliefs is the home field advantage. Can you
Yes.
share that with our listeners?
Well, we've known about the home field advantage a lot. I've worked with Coach Pete Carroll out with the Seattle Seahawks, and he told me that it was because the teams win at home because they don't have to travel. They're not tired. They know where the uprights are, their preferred elevation, and the weather that they know. And that's what we thought. We thought that's why teams do better. And the stats on it are incredible. I mean, in college football, regardless of opponent, if you're at home, your likelihood of winning, uh, giving the different types of opponents, is 60% as a chance of winning just by standing in your own stadium, right? Zero point 0.3 more goals in soccer when you're on your home field. That's what everyone believed. And then the pandemic happened. And for the first time in human history, we could watch the athletes play in their home stadium, but without fans in the stands. And scientifically, the home field advantage completely disappeared. There was no statistical advantage from being home. What we learned, it wasn't any of those things. It wasn't the travel, it wasn't the uprights or the weather or the elevation. The only thing was the fans, and they don't even touch the ball. It's the belief that I'm not alone, the people are for me instead of against me, that changes the performance on these teams. So when I think people hear about beliefs, they're like, oh, that this is something psychological. But what we're looking at is we're trying to predict. We're looking at the greatest predictors of future performance. And whether that's sales or in the coal mining industry, it was productivity. We were able to raise productivity by 31%. We've been working with manufacturing organizations. We've been working with all these tech companies, insurance companies. And what we've been able to do is by changing the beliefs of the leaders, we can change the beliefs of the people who want to work there, the people who want to work with that company. So the clients that they're bringing in. So we're doing a lot of client work right now. So when, for example, we're doing a lot, for some reason, the past 2 months have been a lot of financial. And the reason for that is that if somebody doesn't stay at an organization, it's because they believe they can do better elsewhere, or they believe that they're not cared for. They believe that there's not growth. If someone doesn't stay a client of a big bank, it's because they believe that they'll be happier elsewhere, or they'll be more successful. The beliefs are driving these outcomes and literally trillions of dollars of our economy. And if we're able to identify the core beliefs, and if we know what strengthens them, so in the book, the final third of the book is these 6 strategies about how we can change beliefs. And by changing those beliefs, we change not only what happens now, we change what happens next for those teams.
I love that it might impact the longevity in which people stay at companies. This past weekend, I went to a reunion of EDS, and I know you live here in Dallas, and EDS was the company founded by Ross Perot. It doesn't even exist anymore, but they had this open house to say goodbye to a building, and hundreds of people showed up. That culture was so strong, and I think there was a belief that it just was the greatest company and that it made sense to just work there forever. I mean, I worked there 20 years, and that was not uncommon.
We just did a study, a large study with World at Work, and we were looking at people's perceptions of their beliefs about their benefits and their compensation. Because normally in the past, if we wanted to get somebody to stay at a company, we pull those levers. And what we found is 73% of people were actually satisfied with their benefits and compensation. And 75% of people were actively looking for a new job. So what we were learning was that you need benefits and compensation to get you into the room. But what keeps people at an organization, that's the belief. So now we're looking at how do you add beliefs and benefits together to raise retention rates. And LinkedIn, we were able to move their retention rates from 80% to 94% by changing the beliefs about how connected that they were to other people. So we've got the data for this, but we also have very practical ways you can do this at a workplace and at home as well, which is, I hope it travels back to there as well.
That's awesome. Well, listening to you talk, I feel like the message goes across industry, and it's a leadership message. It's a sales message. You mentioned financial. Is there any other area that you feel like it just really resonates?
Leadership a lot, because what we're looking at is not just how do I change my beliefs, but the 6 strategies are about how do you change other people's beliefs instead of just letting them go on and with their beliefs about the world. What we're attempting to do is to shift their beliefs about the world, to get them to believe my behavior matters, or I'm not alone, or this work is meaningful, or I matter, or I have something to give, or I have something to be grateful for. When people hold these beliefs, it changes their longevity. It changes their retention rates, their sales, their healthcare costs, all the things we were starting to see with the happiness advantage exploded in value. when you started to look at these 7 beliefs that people had across the board. The other place we work a lot in is medical, because we have great research that we've been doing since the pandemic, where we were able to take companies that were going through restructuring and that were not profitable. They're profitable now. One of the hospital systems we started working with, I created an intervention that follows those 6 strategies, and they now have top 1% patient safety in the nation. So it shows us if you change the beliefs of the nurses and the physicians and staff, we can show you what happens not only to the patients, but we can show what actually happens to their families as well in terms of their well-being. So with big data, we can track all of this. But when you're able to touch those key performance indicators, like we can move financial decision making, or we can get people who are working with financial advisors to want to stay with those financial advisors, or increase the likelihood. So that's when things start to get very exciting. And let me tell you one other really quick study that's not on any of these, so it's not driving towards your answer there, but this just shows you the power of it. A study came out after my book came out, and what they found at Yale is that we believe that as you get older, you decline mentally and physically. We believe that, and it actually happens to us. The average person, that's what happens to them. Majority of people, that's what happens to them. But 1/3 of the seniors that they followed for a 12-year period of time, from 65 to 77, 11,000 seniors, 1/3 of them, their cognitive skills actually improved on all the tests that they took at 65. They were better at 77 than at 60. 1 out of 3 seniors did the exact opposite about what we believe. 1 out of 4, they were physically better at 77 than they were back at 65, which we don't even believe. We don't put that in the belief category. We put scientifically, you just decline. There is decline, but it's after 77 for 1/3 of the people. And they look back into the data. What is the difference between these individuals that thrive and the ones that didn't? And the only difference was whether or not they believed growth was possible, or they believed that as you get older, you decline. And if they believed the growth was possible, 1 out of 3 of them had the escape velocity from that belief to create change. And that's what we're looking for in these companies and these hospital systems and with these leaders, is that if you can get people to change what we thought was fact about the world, to believe that meaning is possible, that hope is possible, that change is possible, that we can hit these targets, what happens is you dramatically improve the likelihood of that occurring.
Well, that may tie in to my last question, which is, what is one of the most practical ways in which someone could really strengthen the 7 positive core beliefs?
This is not even one of the 6 strategies that I talk about in the talk, but this is one of the things that I describe early on, is that the fastest way you can improve your leadership and parenting in terms of these beliefs is, so often we say, I believe you guys can hit these targets, right? I believe you're going to love that. I know you're going to love that new school, honey. Or like, I know you'll find a date for prom, or you'll definitely make it onto the team. We say these belief stems, but it doesn't give the brain any foothold to believe that it's true and to change our behavior. So when we look back into philosophy, into psychology, one of the easiest things to do that takes 20 seconds or less is simply to add in a qualifier and a warrant. A warrant is the because statement, and the qualifier is the if then. So for example, instead of a sales leader being like, I believe you guys can hit these targets next year, we're going to be an X billion-dollar company. And then people are like, yeah, right. Like, look how hard it was hard last year.
Yeah.
Instead, if that leader adds warrants, the because statement said, because you've hit your targets 3 years in a row, because we have this new technology, because we think that we have a better product than the competitors, I believe that you're going to be able to hit these sales targets. It gives the brain that foothold that moves us from, yeah, right, to, yeah, you're probably right. And then the if then statement, that's the conditional part, that's the qualifier. If someone's like, if someone's like, I know you're gonna make it onto the basketball team. You want to make it on the basketball team. I know you can do it. If you say, if you keep practicing, if you meet up with a coach, if you listen to them, if you listen to me, if you make friends, if you eat right and sleep, you have an increased likelihood of being successful. And what we find is that now you're looking at the past for reasons why this works, but at the same time, you're changing the behavior. And when leaders do this, when parents do this, when students start to do this, it moves from a wish fulfillment belief to something that's actively, scientifically changing our prediction of what happens next. The beliefs don't just change the math about what's possible and probable. Beliefs change the very paths that we take within our lives.
This is such a positive message. I love it. I love it. You talked in the opening of your book about a lot of angry podcasters, and this episode is anything but angry. It's
Right.
so full of hope and encouragement. I am just thrilled that you're back and that audiences are going to have an opportunity to get this information. I know that as event planners, we talk to them every day, and they are so often asked to build an agenda around the latest and the greatest as it pertains to AI. And I
Right.
just really want to encourage all of the event planners that are listening to balance that message, to balance it with what Shawn is talking about. His book really builds a case that the modern world can edit genes, it can teach machines to think. It can teach cars to drive without a driver. But we find meaning as humans and we sustain joy through our beliefs. AI can't believe, and the power of belief has power. So I'm hoping that everyone will couple this important new research and the message in your book with the AI how-to and consider bringing Shawn back to speak to your organization if he's spoken in the past, or introduce him to your organization if he hasn't spoken to you. We're happy to help with that here at GDA Speakers. And Shawn, I am excited you're back, and we're going to get to do a whole lot more work together.
Great. Sounds wonderful.
Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.